All right, you ready for this? We're diving deep into something that just dropped, the Tesla Model Y refresh, nicknamed the Juniper by some eager fans, breaking down what we know so far from the official China launch. And let me tell you, things are getting interesting.
What's fascinating here is that this refresh goes beyond just a cosmetic update. Tesla seems to have addressed some key criticisms from existing owners and is positioning the Model Y to be even more competitive against other EVs in its price range.
Here's where it gets really interesting. There are design cues from the Cybertruck, a long-awaited feature that's sure to make parking easier, and a surprise for those who are adamant about a certain control element. Let's unpack it all. Okay, so first things first, they brought back the turn signal stock. After years of pushing that minimalist, all-touchscreen interior, they caved, at least in some markets.
It's a fascinating move, right? I mean, Tesla specifically called it out as being based on valuable customer feedback, which I guess suggests they're really paying attention to what drivers want, even if it means going back on a design element they've been pushing for so long.
I'm curious to see if this signals a broader shift in their design philosophy. Like, maybe they're realizing that some things, like good old-fashioned turn signals,
Yeah.
are just better left untouched.
It's possible, but for now, it seems like they're trying to find a balance. They're still pushing boundaries with things like that Cybertruck-inspired front light bar, but also willing to compromise on certain features, for practicality.
Hold on, did you say Cybertruck light bar? Is that what's going on with the front end?
Yep, the Model Y gets a full-width light bar that runs across the entire front end. It houses the headlights and the daytime running lights. Definitely gives it a much more aggressive and, dare I say it, futuristic look.
And they didn't stop there, did they? The back end also got a pretty major makeover.
Oh yeah, there's a full-width light bar back there as well, which Tesla is describing as the first indirect reflective body panel taillight. We'll have to wait and see exactly what that looks like in person, but the description, it kind of suggests a pretty unique glow.
It seems like they're trying to create a more cohesive design language, across the entire Tesla lineup. Speaking of which, did they introduce any new colors?
Well, they did add a glacier blue, which is supposed to be lighter than the previous blue, and it might even have a satin finish. It's replacing the old blue, but all the other color options are staying the same.
I got it. New blue, same everything else.
Yeah,
And of course, it wouldn't be a Tesla refresh without some new wheel options, right?
absolutely. They've got two new choices: 19-inch Aero wheels with updated aerodynamic covers, and 20-inch Helix 2.0 wheels. The Aero wheels have a more angular design than the current Aero covers, and the Helix 2.0 wheels are similar to the Model 3's Nova wheels, but a bit larger.
Okay, so those exterior updates are definitely eye-catching, but the real luxury upgrades, I think, are waiting for you inside. What do they do to the interior?
The interior updates are very similar to what we saw in the Model 3 Highland refresh. Wraparound ambient lighting, lots of soft touch materials, and that signature Tesla minimalist design.
Yeah.
At least for now.
And I'm guessing the 15.4-inch main touchscreen is still front and center.
You bet. It's got slimmer bezels now, and they finally added wireless charging, which is, pretty much a standard feature these days.
You know what parents are going to love? That second row screen they finally added. No more "Are we there yet?"
Yeah.
on those road trips.
It's a smart move by Tesla, keeps the passengers entertained, and it adds to that overall feeling of luxury they're going for.
And speaking of luxury, can you believe they finally added ventilated front seats? My leather seats. They get toasty in the summer. This is a game changer.
It seems like they're really listening to customer feedback on features like this. And speaking of listening to feedback, we've got to talk about that turn signal stock again. What do you think about Tesla bringing it back? Does this signal a shift in their design philosophy?
Honestly, I'm a little torn. Part of me loves the idea of like a super minimalist interior.
Mm-hmm.
But the other part of me, I think that some controls are just better left as, physical buttons or stalks. What about you?
I think Tesla is trying to find the right balance. They want to be innovative and push the boundaries, but they also don't want to alienate customers who prefer a more, traditional approach. It'll be interesting to see how they handle this going forward.
Well, one thing they haven't backtracked on is the powered second row seats that fold flat electronically. That's a first for the Model Y. And the trunk now opens automatically when you approach the car, thanks to ultra-wideband technology.
Those are both great additions that add to the overall convenience and, luxury of the Model Y. They're really packing in the features with this refresh.
So we've covered the design inside and out, but what about the stuff that really matters, the performance and range? Did they make any big changes there?
No major platform changes. The peak charging power is still 250 kilowatts, And the battery tech is the same as the current Model Y. They did manage to squeeze out a slightly better range, though, likely due to those aerodynamic improvements we talked about.
So is this 3% range improvement really a game changer? Is that enough to sway buyers in such a crowded market?
Well, it's not a massive leap, but it's not insignificant either. China uses a different way to measure range, so it's not directly comparable to what we see in the US, but based on their estimates, we could be looking at around 350 miles for the long-range model. That's, potentially an extra 10 miles on your weekend trip.
Okay, so a little more range, but what about speed?
The top speed is actually down a bit to 125 mile per hour from 135 mile per hour, but don't worry. The acceleration is still a very respectable 0-60 in 4.3 seconds for the long-range model.
So a little less top speed, but who's really pushing a Model Y to 135 mile per hour anyway?
Exactly. They've also retuned the suspension for a smoother and quieter ride, which is likely similar to the well-received changes in the Model 3 Highland.
Now, this next bit is just for our friends in China, at least for now, but they're releasing a special launch edition to celebrate the start of production.
It comes with all sorts of cool stuff, like unique badging, door sill plates, special markings on the charging console, upgraded vegan suede for the black interiors, and the all-wheel drive launch edition versions even come with the acceleration boost included.
Sounds like they're pulling out all the stops for the China launch. All right, we've covered a lot of ground here. What are your overall thoughts on this refresh so far?
Well, I think it's clear that Tesla is paying close attention to customer feedback and making changes based on what they're hearing. They're also clearly trying to, up the ante in terms of luxury and refinement, especially in competitive markets like China.
You know what strikes me? It feels like Tesla is refining their strategy. They're not just adding flashy features for the sake of it. They're addressing real criticisms and making the Model Y more well-rounded and appealing.
I agree. It'll be interesting to see if this focus on refinement continues across the entire Tesla lineup. We still haven't heard anything about a refresh for the Model Y performance or any potential updates to the Model S and X.
Those are some great points. We were talking about how Tesla seems to be focusing on refinement with this Model Y refresh. I want to dig into that a little more,
Yeah.
especially when it comes to the performance and range.
Sure. What specifically jumps out at you?
Well, you mentioned they squeezed out a bit more range, but only about 3%. Is that really something they should be shouting about?
It's a valid point. It's not a huge jump, but it does show they're committed to, maximizing efficiency. Even when there are no major changes to the battery or motors, remember, even small improvements can add up to real-world benefits for drivers. That extra 10 miles of range could be the difference between, making it home and getting stranded.
Yeah, you're right. I guess every little bit helps.
Yeah.
What about the slight decrease in top speed? Is that another efficiency play?
It's possible by limiting the top speed, Tesla might be able to optimize the battery and motor performance for those everyday driving scenarios that are much more common than, say, hitting 135 on the Autobahn.
So they're sacrificing a bit of top-end speed for a smoother, more efficient ride overall. Makes sense. I guess most people aren't taking their Model Y to the track.
Exactly. And don't forget about that retuned suspension. They're saying it'll make for a smoother and quieter ride, which could be a big deal for, drivers who prioritize comfort.
Especially on those long road trips. Speaking of which, we were talking about that second row screen and how much parents are going to love it. I can see this being a huge selling point for families.
Absolutely. It's a feature we've seen in other luxury EVs, and it just makes sense for a car that's often used for, family trips, keeps the kids entertained, and it helps maintain a peaceful atmosphere in the cabin.
And let's not forget about those other interior upgrades. Those ventilated front seats are going to be a lifesaver in hot climates. I know I'm not the only one who's suffered through a long drive with sweaty leather seats.
Right. It's a small detail, but it makes a big difference in terms of comfort and perceived luxury.
And the wraparound ambient lighting adds a touch of elegance to the cabin as well. It's the subtle touches that really elevate the overall experience.
Agreed. They're really creating a sense of ambiance with these updates.
Now, we've talked a lot about the customer-centric approach with this refresh, but what about the tech innovations? Did they introduce anything truly groundbreaking?
Well, I wouldn't say groundbreaking, but there are some noteworthy additions. The front bumper camera, for example. It's a feature that was previously exclusive to the Cybertruck. Makes parking and maneuvering in tight spaces so much easier. And it also enhances the functionality of Tesla's Smart Summon feature.
So it's not just about convenience. It's about, improving safety and making the car smarter.
Exactly. And the automatic trunk opening with ultra wideband technology is another example of, Tesla leveraging technology to enhance the user experience. It's those little things that make a big difference in terms of everyday usability.
And while it's not available in all markets yet, that power frunk is another nice touch that adds to the Model Y's practicality.
Yeah, it's a feature we've seen in other Tesla models. And it's especially useful for the Model Y, which is often used for, hauling cargo. It just makes accessing that front storage space so much easier.
Okay, so they're making it more luxurious, more convenient, and more tech-savvy. But what about the big question, how does this refresh stack up against the competition?
That's where things get interesting. The EV market is becoming, well, incredibly competitive, with new players emerging all the time. The Model Y was already a strong contender, but this refresh definitely makes it a more formidable opponent.
So what are the key rivals we're talking about here?
Well, in terms of size and price, the Model Y is going head-to-head with cars like the Ford Mustang Mach-E, the Hyundai Ioniq 5, and the Kia EV6, just to name a few.
And how does the refreshed Model Y measure up?
Well, it's got some clear advantages, like Tesla's supercharger network, which is still far more extensive and reliable than most other charging networks. That's a huge selling point for people who do a lot of long-distance driving.
And what about in terms of features and performance?
The Model Y holds its own there as well. The range is competitive, the performance is impressive, and the interior is now even more luxurious.
Hmm.
Plus, Tesla's technology, particularly their autopilot system, is still considered to be, among the best in the industry.
So they're not just resting on their laurels, they're actively innovating and improving their vehicles to stay ahead of the curve.
Exactly. They're not just trying to keep up with the competition, they're trying to set the bar even higher.
All right, so we've talked about the updates, the competition, and the overall impact of this refresh. But before we wrap things up, I want to bring it back to the listener. What does all this mean for someone who's considering buying a Model Y?
That's a great question. I think this refresh makes the Model Y a more compelling option than ever before, especially if you're looking for a combination of performance, luxury, and technology.
So would you say now is a good time to buy one?
Well, that depends on your individual circumstances and priorities. If you're in a market where the refreshed Model Y is available and you've been waiting for these specific updates, then absolutely go for it.
But what if you're not in a hurry?
Then it might be worth waiting to see how things shake out in the coming months, especially if you're in North America where, we still don't have an official release date or pricing. Plus, there's always the used market to consider. With all these refresh Model Ys hitting the road, we could see some great deals on pre-refresh models.
That's a good point. And we should also remember that Tesla is known for making frequent updates
Right.
and introducing new variations of their vehicles. So even if you wait, there's always a chance that something even better will come along down the line.
Exactly. It's a constantly evolving landscape, and Tesla is always pushing the boundaries. So the best advice I can give is, do your research, weigh your options, and choose the car that best fits your needs and budget.
Solid advice. All right, we've covered a ton of ground in this deep dive, but there's one last thing I want to touch on before we wrap things up. We've talked a lot about the nuts and bolts of this Model Y refresh, but I think it's worth zooming out for a second and looking at the bigger picture.
What do you mean?
Well, we've seen Tesla really emphasizing refinement with this one, listening to customer feedback and even backtracking on some of their design decisions.
Right, like bringing back the turn signal stock?
Exactly. Does this signal a shift in Tesla's overall strategy? Are they moving away from being, like a purely tech-focused disruptor and embracing a more mature, customer-centric approach?
It's a fascinating question, isn't it? I mean, in the early days, Tesla was all about, pushing boundaries, challenging the status quo,
Yeah.
showing the world what electric cars could be.
They were the rebels, the underdogs.
Exactly. But as the EV market matures and it becomes more mainstream, it makes sense that Tesla would adapt their approach.
So are they going soft? Becoming just another car company?
Not necessarily. I think they're realizing that to achieve true mass market success, they need to appeal to a wider range of buyers, not just the early adopters and tech enthusiasts.
So striking a balance between innovation and practicality.
Exactly. I mean, they're still pushing the envelope with things like the Cybertruck, but they're also making their, existing models more user-friendly and appealing to a broader audience.
Yeah, this Model Y refresh seems like a perfect example of that.
I agree. It's got all the latest tech, but it's also, well, it's more comfortable, more convenient, and more refined. than its predecessors.
It feels like they're trying to create a more premium experience, which makes sense given the price point of the Model Y.
Right. They're not just competing with other EVs, they're also going up against, luxury brands like BMW, Audi, and Mercedes.
So this is about more than just selling cars. It's about building a brand that represents a certain lifestyle.
Absolutely. And I think this customer-centric approach is key to achieving that.
It'll be interesting to see how this plays out in the long run. Will other automakers follow suit and start prioritizing customer feedback and refinement over flashy gimmicks?
I think they'll have to. Consumers are becoming more, discerning. And they're looking for vehicles that offer a complete package performance, technology, comfort, and convenience.
So what does this all mean for the average car buyer?
I think it means we're entering a new era of electric vehicles, one where the focus is on the driver experience as much as the technology under the hood.
And that's a good thing, right?
Absolutely. It means we can expect more EVs that are not only fun to drive, but also practical, comfortable, and well suited to our everyday lives.
Well said. I think that's a perfect note to end on. We've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive into the Tesla Model Y refresh, from the design updates to the performance tweaks to the broader implications for the EV market as a whole. Thanks for joining us.